So, episode 9 of House of the Dragon had revealed Rhaenyra giving birth to a stillborn daughter. But there is one thing the show left out that book readers were waiting for. According to Fire and Blood, the princess shrieked curses all through her labor, calling down the wrath of the gods upon her half-brothers and their mother, the queen, and detailing the torment she would inflict upon them before she would let them die. She cursed the child inside her too, Mushroom tells us, clawing at her swollen belly as Maester Gerardus and her midwife tried to restrain her and shouting, "Monster, monster, get out, get out, get out." When the babe at last came forth, she proved indeed a monster, a stillborn girl, twisted and malformed, with a hole in her chest where her heart should have been, and a stubby, scaled tail. So, in the books, Rhaenyra's child would be born with a very peculiar deformity, a scaled tail, and she would announce the following day that her daughter had been named Visenya. And you might not have caught it, but House of the Dragon had given a little nod to Visenya's birth all the way back in episode 1.
After this miserable pregnancy, I wouldn't be surprised if I hatched an actual dragon.
And he will be loved and cherished.
Rhaenyra has already declared that she's to have a sister.
Really?
She even named her
Dare I ask?
Visenya.
As sensational as Queen Rhaenyra giving birth to a child with a scaled tail might have been, what is even more interesting is that this is not an isolated phenomenon. In the books, there is actually a pattern of stillborn Targaryen infants with similar dragon-like deformities, and it's happened often enough that book readers have given it a name: dragon babies. One example you were probably already aware of actually occurred way back in Book 1 of Game of Thrones, in Season 1 of the television show, when Dany gives birth to her stillborn son, fathered by Khal Drogo.
They say the child was
monstrous. He was scaled like a lizard, with leather wings like the wings of a bat.
And that's not all. In the books, Maegor the Cruel was a son of Aegon the Conqueror. Maegor was plagued by infertility, and what children did result from his marriages were described as deformed monstrosities, and one of his wives, Queen Eleanor, delivered a stillborn son described as an eyeless boy with rudimentary wings. Interestingly, Fire and Blood details another birth that book fans speculate is another one of these deformed instances, and this may be why the show had retconned the way that Laena Velaryon had died. Because originally, Laena didn't die while the child was still inside her. In the books, she dies 3 days after giving birth to a deformed son. A day and a night of labor left Laena Velaryon pale and weak, but she finally gave birth to the son Prince Daemon had so long desired. But the babe was twisted and malformed, and died within the hour. Nor did his mother long survive him. Her grueling labor had drained all of Lady Laena's strength, and grief weakened her still further, making her helpless before the onset of childbed fever. And these are just some of the instances we're aware of. In the books, the Targaryen dynasty is riddled with several stillbirths and miscarriages, from Maegor the Cruel all the way down to Mad King Aerys, that we just don't have a lot of information on. So now, you are probably asking yourself, why are Targaryens giving birth to scaled lizard babies? It's a good question, and it's one that's been asked by book readers for years. And the answer is that Targaryens are the blood of old Valyria, an ancient society steeped in sorcery, who claimed to be kin to dragons, and whose blood mages were rumored to twist the flesh of both beasts and men to bring forth twisted, half-human children. And when Targaryens say they are the blood of the dragon, or have the blood of the dragon, it's more than just a metaphor. There is actually truth to these claims. But to understand how Valyrians came to possess these blood ties, we must first understand how dragons were created. And this is where it gets interesting. As it turns out, dragons are not naturally occurring creatures in George R.R. Martin's world. If you have watched my previous videos on dragon origins, you will know that the ancient Valyrian legend of dragon origins states that dragons sprang forth from the 14 flames, and that the Valyrians themselves claim to be kin and share blood ties to the dragons themselves. The truth, however, is that dragons were created by their blood mages, and that humans were likely needed for the sorcery involved in dragon creation. A very intelligent scholar called Septon Barth, who had a knack for being right on pretty much everything, served as Hand of the King for Viserys' grandfather, King Jaehaerys. Septon Barth had become dedicated to researching dragon origins and had put forth the hypothesis that the blood mages of Valyria had created dragons by combining two creatures, the wyvern and the firewyrm. In addition to coming from a source like Septon Barth, who has historically been correct, there is a lot of textual evidence in the books to support this claim, such as a character in the House of Black and White telling Arya that firewyrms are kin to dragons, and Dany wondering if her dragons can tunnel through the rock of the Great Pyramid of Meereen, like the firewyrms of old Valyria. And the next time we see her dragons, Viserion had dug a lair through its stone and was resting inside. We also have the World Book mentioning that the Maesters believe wyverns are cousins to dragons, as they are matched to dragons in all respects, save for two. Wyverns cannot breathe fire, and they are generally smaller in size. But those traits that the wyvern lacks, the firewyrm possesses, as they are capable of breathing fire and can grow to monstrous proportions. So between these two creatures, you have all the traits necessary for dragon creation. And then when you take a look at how dragons are described in the books, they are often given serpentine or worm-like descriptions. For example, you have Caraxes, who is the bloodworm. There's the Windworm Tower of Dragonstone. Aegon's dragon Sunfire is described as a great golden worm. Not to mention all the times dragons were given serpentine or snake-like descriptions throughout the series. Then, when Fire and Blood was published in 2018, we were given a smoking gun. The hatching of Laena Velarion's dragon egg. Not the Laena Velaryon from the show. This Laena Velaryon was the daughter of Alan Oakenfist Velaryon. The first omen of the dark times to come was seen on Driftmark, when the dragon's egg presented to Laena Velaryon upon her birth quickened and hatched. Her parents' pride and pleasure quickly turned to ash, however. The dragon that wriggled from the egg was a monstrosity, a wingless worm, maggot white and blind. Within moments of hatching, the creature turned upon the babe in her cradle and tore a bloody chunk from her arm. As Laena shrieked, Lord Oakenfist ripped the dragon off her, flung it to the floor, and hacked it to pieces. A wingless worm, maggot white and blind. Although the description of a worm-like creature emerging from her dragon egg is quite telling, there is something you might not have noticed. Firewyrms are said to be subterranean, creatures said to bore through stone and soil. If you have taken biology in the past, you will know that creatures who live in subterranean habitats void of light are often found to have two features. They often lack pigment and are often eyeless or have vestigial eyes that are without function and blind, because eyesight and pigment are unnecessary in habitats that are completely void of light. This real-world concept happens to be one Martin has incorporated into his world, as there are subterranean fish within the caves of Westeros that also have this feature. In fact, in another fantasy piece entitled In the House of the Worm, Martin had incorporated subterranean worms into this story and had made sure to give them the same pale and eyeless features as well. So, because this is a concept our author has incorporated into his series, and it's also one he's used in the past, this means there is a pretty good chance that the firewyrms who thrive in similar dark conditions may also be white and blind or eyeless. So, in the case of Laena's dragon, not only do we have an instance where a dragon is born wrong, without limbs, and is described as a worm, but in addition to that, this dragon is also born maggot white and blind. So what we are probably being given here, and what is probably being hinted at, is a deformed dragon whose worm genetics had simply presented more physical. Now, after taking into consideration the Valyrian claims of descending from dragons and understanding how dragons were created, let's circle back to the deformities in Targaryen stillbirths and examine their features more closely. If you recall, Maegor the Cruel fathered several stillborn deformed children. His child with Alice Haraway had twisted limbs, a huge head, and was eyeless. His child with Jane Westerling was reportedly a legless and armless creature, and Queen Eleanor delivered a stillborn child described as an eyeless boy with rudimentary wings. And when we compare these descriptions to Laena Valerian's dragon hatchling, who was born limbless and blind, with Maegor's children, in addition to rudimentary wings, we also see the limbless and eyeless deformities as well. So, in reality, he didn't father one dragon baby, he fathered 3. And when we examine the quote from Fire and Blood regarding Maegor's inability to have children, the author is literally telling us that his seed is full of, quote, worms. Then, when we examine Daenerys' child Rhaego, he was also born blind. And Rhaego's description echoes not only the children of Maegor, but also echoes the deformities seen in stillborn Visenya, the daughter of Queen Rhaenyra, a child described as twisted and malformed, with a stubby, scaled tail. What all these births have in common are the traits of species used in dragon creation, and serves as proof to the claims of the blood they share. Because if dragons were created through blood magic, if the Valyrian race shares the blood of the dragon, that would mean the Valyrians are likely what would be considered the product of blood magic as well. Basically, the product of a desired outcome, which is what Martin may have been hinting at, with careful breeding being mentioned when appearance and affinity for dragons was discussed. The great beauty of the Valyrians, with their hair of palest silver or gold, and eyes in shades of purple not found amongst any other peoples of the world, is well known, and often held up as proof that the Valyrians are not entirely of the same blood as other men. Yet there are maesters who point out that, by careful breeding of animals, one can achieve a desirable result, and that populations in isolation can often show quite remarkable variations from what might be regarded as common. This may be the likelier answer to the mystery of the Valyrian origins, although it does not explain the affinity with dragons that those with the blood of Valyria clearly had. And if the Valyrians do possess the blood of the dragon, that would also explain their practice of incest that was common amongst the dragon lords specifically. According to the World Book, this practice went back to Old Valyria, where it was common amongst many of the ancient families, particularly those who bred and rode dragons. The blood of the dragon must remain pure, the wisdom went. The opening credits themselves may also be a clue. According to showrunner Ryan Condal in an interview with History of Westeros, which is linked below, the credits are this kind of unknowable technology from Old Valyria as a way that they have of tracking their genealogy. Again, a representation of it. We don't really know what we're looking at, but trust in that the blood mages and the people that kept track of genealogy back in Valyria, where they had all their crazy technology and magics, would have known exactly what that was. If you recall, it was the blood mages who created dragons, and it's also coincidentally the blood mages who have this unknowable technology for tracing Old Valyria's genealogy. And according to Viserys in episode 2, the Anogrion is where the blood mages would work their craft.
This was the Anogrion. But the blood mages worked their craft.
And if you look closely, you can see 3 rivers of blood flowing from the Anogrion summit, possibly symbolizing the magic used in dragon creation and the bloodlines they possess. Well, that about wraps things up for today. A link to my dragon creation playlist is in the description box below. And if you like my video and want to help my channel, be sure to leave a comment and hit the like button. And if you are interested in more videos like these, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.